Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about how to invest readers or audiences in your main character. So writers, people who want to tell stories will be interested in this or should be interested in this topic, but also even if you're not a writer or a storyteller, understanding this principle of storytelling will help you evaluate good stories from bad stories. It'll also help you be able to articulate, why we've all had that experience. Maybe we've seen a movie and it just didn't resonate with us, and we're thinking, it was, it seemed like a good, well-told story, visually, cinematically. If it was a movie, maybe it was wonderful or whatever. Why was I bored, or why do I not care for it? And you realize that you weren't invested in the main character. You just simply couldn't care less about the main character. Books will do this quite often. They just miss the mark on audience investment or reader investment in the main character. So whether you're a storyteller or just interested in stories, I think you'll benefit from this. There are three basic ways to invest readers into your character, or audiences into your character. Three basic elements: competence, humor, and sympathy. These are the three ways to invest readers into your character. And you should use some sort of combination, usually, of them. Varying degrees. There are all kinds of possibilities of, various different mixtures, proportions, more of this one than that one, and so forth. But there are some rules, some ways that you should use some mixtures of these three elements for certain archetypes in ways that just really don't work, depending on the archetype, and they will kill audience investment in a character. They absolutely will. And then there's a misunderstanding I think we have today of one of the elements that I'll go through as well. So let's talk about them. Obviously, sympathy. You can invest the readers or audiences into a character by making them feel sorry for a character. You obviously need to do that delicately. No one wants to just watch a character be nothing but dumped on. If an audience is feeling sorry for a character, they're also feeling sorry. And we don't really like to feel sorry. This is entertainment. Now, we'll accept it, and we will understand on some level that, it's necessary for catharsis and whatever, So we're willing to feel sorry for characters, but you don't want to overdo it. It's obviously you can overdo it. Humor. You can have audiences... If it's nothing but humor, audiences will not invest in the character. That doesn't mean they won't watch it, depending on the genre of it. Think about like Family Guy, for example. No one really cares about Peter Griffin. He's a horrible, horrible individual, right, as a character. But you don't watch that show to invest in his character and follow his journey. It's not that kind of show. It's supposed to just make you laugh with silly randomness or whatever, So if you just used humor, maybe that would work based on the genre, but that's not the way to build character investment. No one's going to care about the character. And you think about a story, why do you want audiences to care about your character? Well, obviously, so that they'll want to stick with that character through the story. They'll want to root for them. They'll be there for the events of the story. And in ways to do that, you also need to have good character growth, character development. I might do another video at some point on how to maintain the tension of a tale and get good character development. A character at the end of a story should never be the exact same character that they were at the beginning of the story. We want to see growth. We want to see development. It's the basic tenet of the hero's journey. So you want a reader or audience member invested in your character. So sympathy, obviously, comedy, and competence. We do really like to see heroes who can take care of business, our characters in general, who can just take care of business. That's a lot of fun. You can overdo that too, though. If there's no risk, and this hero is always amazing no matter what. Like I've been reading all of the original stories of Sherlock Holmes lately, and they're fun. I'm really kind of just delving into the detective archetype, and they're fun. But their appeal, even back in the day, wasn't so much that there was going to be tension that maybe Sherlock might not solve this one. Obviously, if he's going to solve it, even if he knows it and doesn't solve it in the public. Watson's going to tell you he really knew what happened or whatever. There are little things like there occasionally, their client is killed or something like that. That happens once or twice, but he still solves it and saves the day in the end, you know? Because the appeal of those stories was more for the mystery itself. Audiences wanted to try to see if they could solve it along with Sherlock. So that was kind of more the appeal. As the detective stories evolved and developed since then, you do have more of a, you had to temper the competence a little bit, you know? Moriarty shows up, you know, in more of the modern day tales a lot more than he did in Conan O'Doyle's stories, because you want a good real match, you know, that would challenge that level of competence. So competence is useful too, but that can be overdone. So all three of these can be overdone, obviously. You also want to invest your readers or audiences, reinvest them at different stages in the character development. Specifically with superheroes, you know, I did a video, and I'll post the link up to it there, about the different types of superhero origins, or hero origin stories. And I talk about, you know, we have these different ways that they can come about, destiny, you know, all these kinds of ways. But there's also 2 steps to the hero origin story. There's the call to action and the empowerment. And these two, depending on the archetype, they can happen. Sometimes they can happen at once. They can happen in different orders. They quite often happen separately. And so a call to action and an empowerment. Those 2 elements have to be in a superhero origin story. And for a superhero story, or a hero story in general, whether it's a fantasy tale, a science fiction tale, or a superhero or whatever, once they come into that empowerment, or if they get the empowerment first and then once they come into the call to action, there needs to be a reinvestment. Because that changes one too. The recognition that you have certain power, or the recognition of that mission and duty ahead of you with the call to action, that changes one too, and audiences need to be reinvested in a character at that certain point. I'll give you an example. Spider-Man. Let's think about the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a cathartic motivational character, okay? So we really meet Peter Parker at first, and it's just sympathy. We just feel sorry for him. Seems like a decent guy, and he's just dumped on. He's the nerd, you know, all this kind of stuff. He is very smart, so maybe a little bit of competence thrown in, but we're not really relying on competence there. It's sympathy. Then he receives the powers. And then we get to have kind of fun with him, because we felt so sorry for him that we want to see the underdog kind of, you know, feel good. And we start to enjoy watching him with these powers and you know, some competence in terms of physical ability there. But then he mismanages those powers, right, at first. And he faces that call to action. So he gets his empowerment first, the spider powers, but it's not until he realizes that he's let Uncle Ben's killer, you know, go out and kill Uncle Ben, and he remembers Uncle Ben's words about great power and responsibility, and he really gets that call to action there. At that moment, then we really ramp up humor and competence. Sympathy's still somewhere in his story, you know, as you go through and you're reading your investment, but you're really humor and competence. Humor because he's a trickster. That's his sub-archetype. He's cathartic motivational, but he's a sub-archetype as a trickster. So you really need that humor level in there. And you see him competently taking care of business, you know, stopping crooks. Not until he's really up against the Green Goblin, in which sympathy reemerges, because he's it's quite difficult for him to take down the Green Goblin, and he knows this is his best friend's father, and so forth and so on. So that's one example of how it's done well. Let's keep going with that cathartic motivational style. Frontiersman will also have an element of humor and competence. You think Green Lantern, Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. Various different, you know, origin stories. You always see him first as kind of the flyboy pilot, you know, really good at his job, an amazing pilot, and takes things kind of lighthearted, a little cocky. You know, frontiersmen should always be a little cocky, not to the point where you think you can't stand them or whatever. You think about Hawkeye, right? Hawkeye, humor and competence. That's how you get invested in his character. And then you can feel sorry for him, you know, later when things happen. I mean, none of these are completely off the table for any character, but you rely on different ones of those 3 at different times. As long as we're with Frontiersman, Doctor Strange. Again, Frontiersman, humor, and competence. When you first meet him, he's incredibly competent. He's an amazing surgeon. You see him, you know, in the movie anyway, you see him save this person who was, you know, being declared dead, brain dead. And in a little bit of humor, too. A cocky way of humor. There's a little element of cockiness, but we may not necessarily like him at the beginning of the movie, but we're interested. He's fascinating. He's intriguing to us. We want to follow his story a little bit. And then sympathy comes in when he gets his own wreck, and we start to kind of grow with him a little bit as he grows, and he receives his empowerment and call to action and so forth. So those are cathartic motivationals. That's Trickster and Frontiersman examples. Doctor Strange is also a mystic, but we haven't really covered mystic in our sub-archetype videos yet, so we'll leave that alone. You always need, though, to remember this. I talk a lot about aspirational heroes. Aspirational heroes, you can never rely heavily on sympathy. Sympathy kills an aspirational hero's, or an audience's interest in an aspirational hero. Because as I just said, if an audience is feeling sorry for a character, what are they feeling? They're feeling sorry. It might be for somebody else, for another character, but they're feeling bad. That's not what aspirational heroes should inspire in people. The aspirational heroes should never make you feel bad. They should make you feel empowered and empowered yourself, but also lifted up, uplifted, and inspired to go out and do better yourself and so forth. That's what the aspirational hero should invoke inside of you. It shouldn't make you feel sorry. You can feel sorry for aspirational heroes to certain degrees at certain times. It was done so well, of course, with Superman the movie 78. We met little Kal-El at first as an infant, you know, Jor-El and Laura placing him in the capsule and whatnot. And you might feel a little sorry for him in principle, but he's an infant. He's not a crying infant. It's not like the infant knows, oh my gosh, my planet and everything I know and my parents, he doesn't know any of that. So you don't really, your heart's not ringing for him in that moment. And then you see him in the module as he grows a little bit, and Jor-El's talking to him, with the recordings in the spaceship. You see him crash land, and we see Jonathan and Martha find him. And then even as a little baby, what's the first thing you see him do? Competently catch that truck and lift it over his head, even as a little toddler there, saving Jonathan. When Jonathan the thing's almost to fall on him when he's trying to change the tire there, and even little baby Kal-El catches it. So the first real emotion that Kal-El himself invokes from you as a toddler is competence, your investment in his competence, and that's great. We see him a little later as a teenager in the football field there, and we start to feel a little sorry for him. He's getting picked on. Seems like a nice guy, but then competence immediately with the way he can run, and he's having fun with these powers. It is fun to have powers. Competence, really good feeling competence, and then you start to again feel a little sorry for him. First of all, that competence is so solidly ingrained and really locked in when Jonathan has his wonderful talk with him and says, "Hey, see you showing off," and he doesn't tell him, "Hey, don't show off. People might find out and come dissect you." No, he says, you're meant for even more than that. You've got these powers for a wonderful reason, and it's certainly not scoring touchdowns. You're meant for something even greater, and that's inspiring. And so we, the audiences, are told to have even higher hopes for Jonathan, for Clark Kent's competence. Then you feel sorry for him when his dad dies. So it's tempered. We got some sympathy popping in here and there. But then when Clark Kent receives his call to action, he's got the powers, but when he goes forth and he creates the Fortress of Solitude in the movie, and Jor-El's teaching him and whatnot, and when you first see him out there in the suit saving the day, nothing but competence. Competence all the way. That's the thing that you want to rely on for an aspirational hero overall. Competence. So we've seen it kind of tracing, and it's a wonderful, fun montage of him stopping different crooks and whatever, and he's having a blast, and then of course the famous helicopter scene, saving Lois Lane. So we've kind of traced that through. It's been a little sympathy here and there, but mainly competence. And you might have some humor, bad vibrations, and all that kind of stuff that he says. Let's look at a way that's poorly done. Man of Steel. Hey, I harp on it a lot, but it's a movie that's just rife with bad examples. All Zack Snyder tried to do to try to get you to care about Clark Kent was wring sympathy out of the character. And as a result, I don't give a crap about that character. You might say, well, no, he competently saved the school bus and he competently saved the fishing boat. What's your definition of competence? Was the people in the fishing boat saved? Was the people in the school bus saved? Sure, but he's sad while he's doing it. The people that he's doing it for are just scared of him. Other people in the movie are telling him, you probably shouldn't have done that. That's not competence. Competence isn't just doing something well. It's the way in which it's presented, the way in which that action is presented to the audience and reader. It needs to be presented as a competent manner, competent way.
And that's how we do that. But no, you're just supposed to feel sorry for him. Oh, because he's so isolated and he's so sad. He's and all the way to the end. I mean, you just, it was nothing but sympathy. He didn't competently do anything. Even defeating Zod in the end, it wasn't competent. Zack Snyder's come out and said that he really wanted to show that heroism is not fun and it's not funny. This is hard and it's sad and it's not always the right things to do and so forth. He was wanting to deconstruct every element of that. And what happens when you take an aspirational hero and you present them and try to build audience investment in them with something like sympathy instead of competence? You don't just change the archetype. You don't get people, okay, now we care about him because we feel sorry for him. No, you get a very divisive character who doesn't inspire people wanting to follow him. No one really cares about the character anymore. Of course, people who would defend the movie, I talk to a lot of people, curiously, like people who claim that they love that movie, and I often find out more often than not that they've got a lot of trauma of their own. And they like seeing other characters work out trauma, or at least have trauma, because Clark doesn't work out anything. And they like just seeing characters with that as some sort of way to work it out on their own. It's bizarre psychology that tries to defend these horrible mistreatments of these characters. But anyway, that's an example of how not to do it and how it will fall apart on you. The last comment I'll make, because the video is starting to get a little bit long, is that one of the things we see today, and this is the problem with a lot of storytelling today. It certainly is the case with the sort of woke ideologues and their stories that they try to push. There's a misunderstanding. People think that competence and virtue are the same thing, and they're not. They're not. So we have characters like Rey or Captain Marvel, these Mary Sue characters or Gary Stu characters if they're male, who the storytellers have imbued with all of their favorite virtues. These are the characters that stand up for the best of the best that we believe in or whatever. And we think if we show that these characters really stand up and have all these great virtues, other people who look up to those virtues will be invested in them. That's not the way that works. That's a flat character. I hold up Superman all the time as an aspirational hero with all of the great virtues that we should look up to. But you see him grow within the space of that first film. You see him make an occasional mistake, right? It was a mistake to kind of show off for his friends there in high school and so forth. He can make mistakes, but never ever doubting that there's a right thing to do and that he should be doing the right thing. He'll just learn how to better do it, and we see that progression. Today in these movies with the Mary Sues, the Gary Stu characters, they're two-dimensional. They're just and the stories around them are crafted so that they don't really have to learn anything. If they learn anything, it's how amazing they already were. It's how other people or other functions and structures are trying to pull them down. And it's not competent. We don't see them competently do anything. We see them virtue signal. And I'm talking about the characters themselves actually virtue signaling. I know that phrase is often used for the storytellers or people, in the industry or whatever, and rightly so. But in this case, when you have a character and you try to build reader investment by virtue instead of competence, they end up virtue signaling, and that annoys people. We don't like characters who insist upon themselves or who the narrative insists upon as they are virtuous and you should like everything they do because they're virtuous and so forth. No, show us that. Build that investment in ourselves. Let us see the way they handle things and then come to that conclusion ourselves as an audience. Like, yeah, they really are virtuous. That's the way you do it. One other example, Batman 89, which I still think, even for all its problems, it's not a wonderful depiction of the iconic Batman. It's got a lot of problems with it. I still think it's the best cinematic version we've had thus far, though. But that movie opens and you meet Batman kicking butt, stopping those people who mugged that poor family, and competence, total competence, right? And you see him as Bruce Wayne later, and there's a little bit of humor there, but competence still, and then there's sympathy mixed in as you see him and find out, as the movie, Vicky Vale and so forth finds out about his parents and so forth. You can mix in some sympathy there, and you see him in that movie, in the 89 Tim Burton film, overcome. He has to kind of, by realizing, even though it's not right, it's not the real Batman story, but realizing that Jack Napier / the Joker was the one who killed his parents, instead of a Joe Chill type character or whatever, he does have to reconfront that element of his call to adventure back then. He has to reconfront that, and we see him process that, and we see him go through it until the end. Again, I'm not defending the film as a whole for all the things Batman does in it, or that it makes Batman do. but it's a good audience investment. Good choices for audience investment. So again, we could go through example after example, but I think I'm going to end up here being about 20 minutes, so I'll stop there. But again, just to recap, 3 ways to invest audiences or readers into your character. Competence, sympathy, and humor. You can use any combination, but make sure that you are using the right combination and the right proportions for the archetype that your hero is. Otherwise, it'll fall apart. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with more. Till then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.